Well, I told Brad we didn't want anybody to know we were going to do that because I wanted to see how many of you might get up and leave and go, what the heck? What are they doing now? Although most of y'all know what's going on here. I'm more worried about our visitors. You're like, what is this? Where are we? Have you been to Lukenbach before? There's nothing there. If you go to Lukenbach, first thing you'll see is this thing, right? I mean, it's nothing. It's a ghost town. If you look at Wikipedia, it's got a population of 3 people. Why would you want to go to Lukenbach, Texas? I mean, what is all this song about? Well, I mean, immediately they sing it, and we're all singing along with it. We're all resonating with this thing that doesn't exist, right? You go a little bit further, you see this sign. Everybody's somebody. And my son, when he was younger, saw that as we were driving off the road to Fredericksburg, and we got off and we went to Lukenbach. He saw that sign, and he said, that's because nobody's here. Everybody's somebody because there's nobody here. But then you keep driving, right? You keep driving, and then you come to this thing. Now, this guy wasn't there when I was there. But the store was open, the old post office, the original post office. And then if you keep looking around, you start realizing exactly what it is that's at Lukenbach. You are. That's it. You show up. Pretty soon, other people show up. You got people listening to music. Sometimes you got somebody big, that a lot of people know. You look around, there's a parking lot that will hold probably 500 cars. And there's a big bandstand. There's a dance hall that looks like an old barn that's basically been remodeled for a dance hall. It's mostly empty. But every now and then, you show up and there's someone else there. And before you know it, other people are showing up. And you have this experience, right? You have this sort of sharing and connection that you didn't have before. Lukenbach, Texas, there's nothing there like salt except what you bring to it. And that's why I wanted to use this illustration, this song in particular. Funny thing about it was, of course, Brad and I were racking our brains. Sharm couldn't be with us that day, but when Sharm's in there too, we're often just sitting around racking our brains about what song will fit with this theme, what song can we think of. Sometimes you send us songs and it's awesome because it fits. But a lot of times we're just sitting there, and then Brad just chimes up and says, yeah, I just recently was adding Lukenbach, Texas to my repertoire. And I looked at him and I said, you ever been there? And he says, oh yeah. I said, there's nothing there like salt. And then I thought, that's a perfect song. It's such a great thing to be able to work with Sharm and with Brad because we just generate these things. Like in here, insights just suddenly come because we're kind of open to the creativity. Call it the spirit of the moment. So for me, the thing about salt and Jesus' sermon here is this idea that there's nothing there except what you bring to it. So Jesus has just finished his Sermon on the Mount, right? This is at the end of the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew. He's just finished all the blessings. This is, blessed are you when you're poor. Blessed are those who are hungry and thirst for righteousness. He's kind of just finished all of this litany of what it is to be human in the world, to be divinely human, to be supremely human in relationship to one another, the kingdom present and now and how we experience that. He's just finished it, and he's looking at this ragtag group of folks, right? There's going to be probably a few lawyers, there's going to be probably a few tax collectors, but there's a whole lot of impoverished people, there's a whole lot of broken people, there's a whole lot of unwelcome people, marginalized people. I mean, this is a ragtag group on the mountain. The people that aren't there listening to him, by and large, are sort of the established, the ones in power, so to speak. And he looks at this ragtag group of people, and he says, you are the salt of the earth. You are what can bring life to life. You are the ones that can make a difference. I mean, what would you do? How would you relate to others? Think about this. To everyone you encounter, I want you to hear this. What would it be if you really believed that you are exactly what is needed to make a difference in the world? I mean, seriously. You are exactly what's needed. That's what Jesus was telling them. It's what essentially we need to hear today. We're exactly what's needed. If it's not changing how you feel or even making you a little bit uncomfortable, you're probably not thinking about it hard enough. The first thought is that maybe we can't make a difference, but the second thought, if you can get past that, is yes, indeed, we can make a difference in every moment that we find ourselves. Salt is who we are. We are best and we are most authentic in terms of connecting with others and empowering others' voices. We are most authentic when we come like salt, when we come empty, when we come open, and we come receptive. This is who we are. Mary Oliver put it this way. She said in her wonderful instructions on life, she said, pay attention, be amazed, tell about it, witness to it. You know what light does, right? All light does is just illuminate. It's actually sort of illuminating what's already there. You just don't see it. To bear witness to the possibilities of life is to illuminate life. Did you know that? That's what we get to do. We get to bear witness to life. But it's hard for us because we tend to bear witness to what angers us, what's pissing us off, what's crude and rude and unacceptable, and we get all hung up in that. We're not really bearing witness to life. Now, I'm not saying you got to ignore stuff that's oppressive or ignore stuff when you feel like you have to speak truth to power, but what I am saying is you are, as you are, everything we need to be to change the world, to make the kingdom present. We are salt of the earth. It is that simple. But I think part of the problem is, I think one of the things that we forget is how to be life. Right? That's a strange thing to say. We forget how to be life because we're caught up in it. Right? It's like you forget what you look like because you're caught up in it. You don't really see how others see you. We don't really see life because we're caught up in living it. Sometimes the only way I think we can truly experience life is to get immersed in something so much larger than us, that we're humbled. We got to get back to nature some. Maybe you go to Lukenbach and you're all by yourself. And you just sit there. And you wait for life to show up. But you got to be in a place where we reconnect with what is larger than us. You remember that sermon I had on how to be a human, and I think I talked about the finitude, the mortality that we have to live with. I think I brought a spritzer out, and I was spraying it, and we were looking at Ecclesiastes, all his vanity, and, you're gone in a spritz of a water bottle. There's something about sitting in the midst of a redwood forest, for example, or of a mountain range, or of a rugged boulder field. There's something about sitting in the midst of that and realizing we're here a pretty short amount of time. We're pretty small in the big picture. And it's that kind of smallness and awe and humility that I think we bring, or we can bring, to our encounters that helps bring life to life. It helps to open up others to recognize life beyond their preoccupations and their baggage and their braggage and their problems and anxieties. Our openness, our humility can bring life to life. I think that's what it means to be salt. There's a great line in the Gospel of Thomas that says, split a piece of wood and I'm there. Jesus is saying this. It says, lift up a stone and you'll find me there. There is this need, I think, for us sometimes to immerse ourselves in something that reminds us we're a piece of the bigger picture. We aren't the bigger picture. We represent. We're a piece of it. But it's not about us, right? And that's the funny thing about salt, because salt is not really about the salt, but salt brings out the flavor. Salt is what opens up flavor. Sweetness, savoriness. Salt by itself, really nothing there. In fact, if you take the two elements apart, they could kill you. They're poison. You bring them together, they're inert. They really don't do anything until you add it to something. We kind of think sometimes we need to see ourselves that way. Humble, open enough to add to the moment. Do you remember that fable about the sun and the wind? Remember that Aesop's fable? Some of y'all remember that? They get in an argument, sun and the wind get in an argument. There's one says they're more powerful than the other, and finally the one says, let's just see. See the guy down there? I bet you, the sun says, I bet you that I can make him take his coat off. The wind says, no, I can do it. And so the wind blows hard, and the more the wind blows, the more it blusters. The guy holds it around him, right? The more force, the more pressure, the more anxiety, the more stress. He bolts it around him. And then the sun just shines, just illuminates the moment. And just as the moment's being illuminated, it's getting a little bit warmer, a little more inviting. takes off his jacket. He gets comfortable. That's what we get to do. That's really what we can do. Any one of us, every one of us, in any situation, can simply come with that sense of awe and wonder and mystery and bring salt to life. This past weekend, some of you were there. If you were attending the Enneagram workshop, would you mind raising your hand? We had several people. There are some others that are in here that aren't here today, but we had about 60 people from the whole church and a couple of people from outside the church that came to this thing called the Enneagram workshop. And it's an interesting thing. One day we'll spend some time looking at the Enneagram and what it is. It's basically a way of understanding our personalities and more importantly, how we relate to one another, our distinctiveness. And there are different types, 9 different types. And after a while, the leader of it, James Patterson, his mother is Susan Stabile. And by the way, side note, if you're interested in pursuing what this is all about, you can go listen to Susan Stabile's podcast. It's an excellent podcast. It's called The Enneagram Journey. And it's a wonderful podcast because it involves people talking to one another. And in conversation, you start to realize who you are more like and who you're not so much like. You start to understand a little bit more about this. But anyway, the Enneagram Journey. So James Patterson, her son, is doing this class, and after he's done this class for a few hours on Saturday, he asks everybody to stand up depending on their types. And as people stand up, we realize, there's all these different types of personalities in this room. And yet here we all are, finding ways to connect, but learning more about ourselves and one another in order to connect. But here's what wasn't said that I thought was amazing, because I knew something a lot of them didn't know. There were people in there who voted for Trump. There were a lot of people in there who don't like Trump. There were lesbians and gays in that room. There were people in there who aren't comfortable with that. But they're here. They're in the room. And before you knew it, everyone was talking with one another. Everyone was creating space for one another. When Jesus says you are salt, he's saying essentially, you got to let go of the baggage and the braggage is a new term of mine. I like that term, braggage. Yeah, you can use that. It's not copyrighted. You got to let go of your baggage. You got to let go of your braggage. You got to let go of your agendas. I understand how important it is for us to have our identities. I got my cups. You got your shirts. We all do that, right? We all head out into the day. We put on our personas. We put on our masks. We put on our identities. We put on our defenses. And we go out into the world. And we ain't connecting. We're just buying. We're trying to buy. To connect, you got to let go of stuff. If anything, you got to recognize, this is just a facade. It's okay. It's important, but it's just kind of the persona, right? We all bring our personas. We all bring our baggage. We all bring our agendas. So we've got to let go of those things. Don't let go of your smiles. That makes a difference, right? But how do we do that? And I think the only way we can do that is to begin to recognize it's not all about us. And to do that, we got to get into something bigger. I think we got to spend some time alone with nature. We got to take walks. We got to let go of things. We got to remind ourselves we're all a part of this together. When I was at the Wild Goose Festival, I want to finish with this last story. I think I've shared this before, but I'm not sure, so I'll share it again. The Wild Goose Festival is this wonderful festival that happens in North Carolina that gathers all sorts of evangelicals, post-evangelicals, even atheists and agnostics. And so these are all people sort of trying to, and its big focus is on progressiveness, but also on social justice and inclusiveness and diversity. And so a big part of it is like, how do we make the kingdom of God a reality that's open and big and wide and diverse and simply comfortable with being about compassion and connection? How do we do that? And so there's about 4,000 people that come. At the end, there's also some pretty well-known speakers and entertainers, but at the end of it, there was one small group, about 30 people that got together in a circle. Brian McLaren, some of y'all know him as an author. Diana Butler Bass is a sociologist out of Houston, I believe. And all these different people, as well as people like Shane Claiborne and Peter Enns, and some of these sort of new post-evangelical sort of scholars. and then a lot of the rest of us kind of in a circle, a very diverse group. And they asked the question, is there a point for Christianity anymore? Is there any reason for Christianity to still be around? What's the future of Christianity in a post-Christian world? And this woman who was at the end, sitting not too far from me, she said something. She said, I have problems with that question because I still like traditional church. I still have an Orthodox faith. I still believe firmly Jesus died for my sins, and I need Jesus to get to heaven. And I think it's important that we still have that message out there. And this was very uncomfortable for her, this whole conversation. And so she said, I've got 2 friends, and I can't get them to come to church. Actually, I think it was 3. But anyway, so I've got these 2 friends. They won't come to church because they just don't believe in all of this anymore, and I don't know how to reach them with Jesus. And they asked questions about who they were. And she said, well, one's a social worker and works with the United Way, and then another one works with Planned Parenthood and then does some volunteer work at the homeless shelter. And she said, they just don't have time for church. They don't have time for Jesus. And I looked at her, and I spoke up. I blurted it out because it just hit me in the head. And I looked at her, and I said, that's fine, but you need to tell your friends if they don't want to believe in Jesus, they got to stop acting like him. We're all salt of the earth. We all are present making a difference. Some of us are aware of it, and it's our intention, it's our passion. Others of us get lost in the busyness of trying to be alive and forgetting what it is to be connected. But we're all salt of the earth. And that's what's so amazing about this idea of salt. And that's what's amazing about you and about me being salt. Salt takes what's ordinary and makes it extraordinary simply by being present and participating. We get to do the same thing. That's why we're here. We are salt of the earth. Amen.